Hybridization is the blending of orbitals. When atoms bond together, their orbitals blend, and they call it hybridization. If you memorize everything on this page, you should do well in the class homework and the class exam and also the AP test. On the AP test, it's a memorization question. They usually don't ask you to explain everything, they just ask you what it is. So what's in the box, that's what's important. When you have a linear shape, the hybridization is SP. When you have a trigonal planar shape, the hybridization is SP2. And tetrahedral would be SP3. I'm going to teach you how to answer the memorized question, and then I will explain the why later on. The why is a little bit complicated, but again, you will never have to explain the why. First of all, when you have a single bond, that is known as a sigma bond. And it is a hybridized orbital between two s orbitals, one from each atom, or an s and a p orbital, or two p orbitals, again, one from each atom. And there's a lot of rotation in a single bond, so it can actually twist and move along that single bond. A double bond is a combination of one sigma bond and one pi bond. Now, your sigma bond, that is a hybridized orbital. But your pi bond is not hybridized, and that's important. Sometimes they do ask that. Because you have that pi bond as part of your double bond, it causes the molecule to lock in place, so to speak. So there's still vibrating and some movement, but there's very, very little rotation. So it's that second pi bond really locks the molecule in place. If you have a triple bond, then this is one sigma bond and two pi bonds. So look at the pattern. The first bond that goes in is a sigma bond. If you add another one, that is a pi bond. And if you add a third bond, that is also a pi bond. So this is why when you have a single bond, it's the weakest bond. It's the easiest to break. If you go to break a triple bond, you have to break 3 bonds. Now, the pi bond is a weaker bond. And that is why when you go to break a double bond, it's not double the strength of a single bond. Because the double bond, all you are adding is a pi bond, which is a weaker type of bond. And as I said before, and I can't emphasize this enough, a sigma bond is due to hybridization or blending of the orbitals. The p bond is due to a p orbital overlap. And that just means that they line up on the same plane and there's some electron exchange. So again, pi bonding is only in double bonds and triple bonds. So let's practice doing the hybridization of the central atom of each of the following. So we're going to identify the shape, and from the shape we're going to identify what the hybridization is. So for hybridization, your answers will be either SP, SP2, or SP3. Those are the only options. So let's look at the first molecule. The first molecule is CO2. I see that's linear. And if it's linear, that's an SP. Now, I memorize this a little bit different, and it's not good chemistry, but it always gives me the correct answer. So I just count around the molecule how many electron domains there are. So there are 2 on the CO2. So I say to myself S and P. So that is a hybridization, SP. That doesn't mean that there is anything to do with the orbitals as far as getting my SP. But if I count it this way, I always get the right answer. So again, bad chemistry, but just a little simple way to remember how to do it. Let's look at this next one. So this is a bent shape, but its electron domain is tetrahedral. That means it has 4 groups coming off a central atom. And so this one is going to be an sp3. So again, a tetrahedral electron domain is sp3. And again, the way I remember it is I just count around. I go S, P, 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 and I just put them together, sp3. So again, that's bad chemistry, how I remember it. But if you remember 4 electron domains or tetrahedral is a sp3, then that's good chemistry. Let's do this next one. So this one also is a tetrahedral electron domain. The shape is trigonal pyramidal, and again, the electron domain is tetrahedral. And so I am going to have 4 groups around. This one is also sp3. Again, if you want to count around, I can do s, p, p, p. Remember, any paired up electrons coming off the central atom, that is part of the electron domain. So that's an electron, where the electrons are, an electron domain. So again, 4 electron domains, it's going to be sp3. Let's look at this one. So let's look at the first carbon. So looking at that first carbon, I see the shape is trigonal planar. So this is 3 groups that are coming off that central atom, so sp2. And again, if you want to count around it like I do, s, p, p. If you have a double bond, it just counts as one electron domain or one area where those electrons are. So don't get crazy with thinking that it's 2 domains. It's not. It's just one electron area. We could also do the second carbon. So this second carbon right here, is just like the first one. It's also going to be an spp. So sp2. We have a more complicated molecule down here. Let's go ahead and do each of the carbons. So when I do this carbon, they've written it together so you can expand it out. And when I expand it out, I can see that it is an sp3 for that carbon. Then we have that second carbon. So this second one here, I look at the shape and I see that there are 3 areas. So that one is going to be sp2. Because remember, you count around spp, so sp2. This oxygen right here also has hybridization in the bonding. This one is not complete. You need to remember that oxygen always has these 2 unbonded electron pairs. And so that makes a difference in the electron domain. Also, you should know that they will be right next to each other. They're going to push the bonds closer together. Remember, if you have oxygen in the middle, it makes a bent molecule. And it's a variation of the tetrahedral electron domain. So this one is an sp3. So watch out if you have oxygens, it will always look like this. The unbonded electron pairs will always be next to each other, and it makes a bent kink in the molecule. Let's look at the very last carbon here. So this is the 4th area of this molecule that we're looking at. And this one, again, you can expand it out. I'll draw it down here. And you can go through and assign it SPPP. This one is also an sp3. This is how you do the hybridization. Now let's go back and let's count the sigma and the pi bonds. So remember, a sigma bond is a single bond and a pi bond is used when we have a double or a triple bond. And we can just go through and count everything up. So let's look at the first one. So this first one, I have 2 sigma bonds, and then I have 2 pi bonds. So in that double bond, one is a sigma and one is a pi. So just that's my total. Let's look at the water molecule. I just have 2 sigma bonds. Ammonia, I have 3 sigma bonds, so only single bonds there. And then on this one, going around and counting all the single bonds, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sigma bonds, and I have 1 pi bond. And you will never be asked to tell which one's the sigma, which one's the pi. That will never be a valid question. Just know that one of them is the sigma, the stronger bond, and then the pi just adds a little bit more strength. And let's do the complicated molecule down here. So we have to remember that it expands on the end. So let's count all the sigma bonds. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I have 10 sigma bonds, and for pi bonds, I have 1 pi bond. Tallying the sigma and the pi bonds, that is a valid AP question and also Again, writing the hybridization, either it's sp, sp2, or sp3. This is what a sigma bond looks like. It's a blending of orbitals. So the orbitals overlap and it gets this blended structure. So looking at A there with the hydrogen molecule, you can see that it is blending two s orbitals. And so that is the orbital shape, the new orbital shape that I get. In example B, blending an s orbital and a p orbital from a fluorine atom, we get a shape that looks like this. So it's just a blending of that orbital. And then in example C, we have a p and a p. This is a sigma bond where the p orbitals overlap, and it looks like that. As I said before, you will only have an sp, an sp2, or you will have a sp3. So those are your only options that you will have. You can take off one electron and so have kind of a different bench molecule, but it would still be sp2. And you can take off one or then two electrons in that tetrahedral electron domain. But here's all your sp3s, your sp2s, and your sp, the linear shape. There, you can get into the d orbitals, but that is not on the AP test because a lot of chemists disagree with this model. They think that it doesn't describe what the bonding that is going on with the d orbitals. And so that was taken out of the AP test like 10 years ago. So all you have to worry about is sp, sp2, and sp3. Let's look into details what hybridization means. So again, it's a blending of orbitals. And let's start off with sp3 hybridization. And so methane is going to be our example. And when we look at the atoms that come into the hybridization, we have hydrogen is 1s. It brings that orbital into the bonding. And with carbon, it brings its valence electrons. Two are in the 2s orbital, and then we have two in a 2p orbital, one in one orbital, one in the next one. So if we use just the orbitals that come into the bonding, the shape doesn't make sense. We do know that it should be tetrahedral. And so what we're going to get is we're going to get a modification of the s and the p orbitals. So we get hybridization with these orbitals, and they look like this. When it's all put together, this is how we get that tetrahedral shape, where you get the 109.5 bond angles. And it's because of the hybridization that you get this shape. When you look at the new orbitals that have the sp3 orbitals, we say that they are degenerate. And degenerate is a word that means they have the same energy. So we're combining the 2p orbitals and the 2s orbitals, and we get 4 sp3 orbitals that are degenerate, or they're the same energy. Now let's look at sp3 hybridization. Again, this occurs when we have trigonoplanar, and we're going to use ethylene as our example. So in this one, we take the an s orbital, and 2p orbitals, and they hybridize, and we get these shapes here. And when they're put together, this is that trigonoplanar shape. And so this is why you have 120-degree bond angles. When you look at the ethylene molecule, you get hybridization between two p orbitals and one s, and those will all be degenerate or all the same energy, but you still have this 2p orbital. And what this does is this has pi bonding, and it's because the p orbital is lined up in the same plane, you get an electron exchange. So top and a bottom, but that would be one bond. Notice that the p orbital is not hybridized, and because it's not hybridized, it is not as strong as that sigma bond, as the single bond. And so that's why a double bond is not twice as strong as a single bond. It's a little bit stronger, and that's because of the pi bonding, but the pi bonding occurs because the p orbitals just happen to line up next to each other when the molecule is put together. So it's geometry that causes that double bond, and it causes the p orbitals to blend their electrons. And again, it's not hybridized, it's just lined up exactly. So here's a picture of that ethylene. So let's explain what's going on here. So right here, this would be my sigma bond. This is the hybridization that's occurring. And then right here, these are my p orbitals. And you can see that they're lined up in the same plane. And because of that, you get electron exchange. And so I know I'm drawing two lines there, but this is what a double bond is. So you get one bond from the sigma and the second bond is from the pi bonding. Let's look at sp hybridization. So this is for linear molecules. And in this linear example, I do have double bonds, so we'll be able to see that we have two sigma bonds and two pi bonds total in the molecule. You can see the hybridization occur. Here is my s orbital, my p orbital. So we get hybridization, and this is why we have a linear shape. So what is happening here is we have a 2s and a 2p. These are hybridized and they are degenerate is what it's called. That means they have the same energy level. So this is my sigma bond. And then I have these two p orbitals coming off that carbon, and they are going to cause a pi bond to form with each of the oxygens. And here we have a picture of this. So this is right here the sigma bond, one on each side of the carbon. And then the pi bonds line up, but on different planes. So you have one pi orbital, or excuse me, one p orbital lining up here. So this would be along the y-axis. So I get a double bond there. And then you have another one that's lined up. This looks like the z-axis. And you get a double bond right there. Okay, so this is how you get that C double bond O. Again, one of them is a sigma bond and then the other one is a pi bond on each side. So your d orbitals can also be involved in bonding. This is what happens with expanded octets. And here we have phosphorus pentachloride, and it's an expanded octet because that phosphorus, it has 10 electrons around it instead of the 8. And they do use these Ds to describe the hybridization, but again, this will not be on the AP test, and that is because a lot of chemists disagree with this model, but it's a pretty picture, so I put it on there so you can see it. And just a note for my homework packet, the very last page does have some tutorials that I want you to go online and do, so there's some practice quizzes. There's a lot of memorization in this whole unit, and so I want you to be able to practice so you're ready for your test. So just be aware that there's some things that you need to do online at the end of your packet, and then just mark that you did it with your scores that you earned. I find that students do better when they do these practices. So be honest and do them. It will help you with your test because the test is going to be very, very similar to those online practice sites.